Welcome to my channel. I would like to talk about Biden's job plan and what it means to us millennials, as well as I'm going to focus in on the employment side of his job plan. I also want to talk about why I think the metrics that government uses to measure job and wealth health in our country is off, as well as like tips at the end of what you could do as a millennial to think about how to improve your financial standing regardless of what laws get passed with current legislation and programs in existence today. So those are the three parts. So first I want to start with Biden's American jobs plan. So he presented it last night to Congress. It's a gigantic $2 trillion package. It's his attempt to be like FDR and leave his influence kind of like Social Security did. So I want to focus in. It's gigantic. It has a lot of infrastructure, and then it has like family, right? Programs for families, including like early education, etc. I want to focus specifically on the jobs portion of it that impacts especially millennials, like my generation. Like for example, me, I graduated in 2008 at the height of the economic crisis, and now where our generation is living through our second crisis with COVID, and of course, the time and the age we want to buy is now low interest rates and investors and everyone's flooding the market right now. And of course, there's a housing shortage to buy. So we're really impacted by, our generation is really impacted by these crises. And I'm going to focus in specifically on jobs because obviously employment and our financial well-being is really dependent on having income, right? So part of the proposal last night, so basically the employer, it's like right to work, which means if there is no longer employment, they could just say you're let go, right? He wants to expand the definition of what it means to be an employee, and he wants to get rid of the concept of independent contractors. However, we saw from like what happened with Uber, for example, in states where they said Uber, you have to make every single driver an employee, we saw that the rates of shortages, right, of having rides available. So we kind of tested that out a little. I think it's, and I think the government is great intention, but again, like what is the actual unintended consequences and impacts, right, of saying you can't be an independent contractor. So I'm curious to see what the impacts of that's going to look like. He also wants to, though, expand it so that two employers can hire one person and establish like joint employment, right? So one employer doesn't have to bear all the costs of Social Security, all the costs of benefits, etc. And he also wants to make it easier for employees to form unions. So that's great, right? Because we can advocate for rights in that case. And he also wants to he wants to fund $40 billion in investment in job training with dislocated workers and sector-based job training, such as in clean energy, manufacturing, and childcare, right? So I think that is good. He wants to also address inequities in STEM and building up STEM education and equities, especially with HBCUs and funding HBCUs to have more equal access to quality STEM education. And of course, in his whole jobs plan thing, like investing in the green economy and the grid and broadband internet obviously helps jobs. It helps the quality and our capability to work. So I think that's great. So now let me talk a little bit about what I think the government, I studied education policy. So I know from a policy lens perspective, what often is missing from a policy side is understanding from the ground level or the practitioner side how policy ends up getting ruled out and how sometimes it has unintended consequences to not work out the way we envisioned it, right? So I think that's what the government needs more help understanding, because in like policy making, it might sound great, let's do all these things, but what are the unintended consequences and how do you feasibly roll that out? I think the government could use help with. And here's a prime example, like government, in order to roll anything out well, you need to know what metrics you're measuring success by. And the government often measures success, especially for these employment type programs, by like unemployment. And I think unemployment is an inaccurate metric of especially our generation's well-being, because unemployment does not measure underemployment or working for less money or working for part-time. Like it doesn't measure all these, unemployment does not measure the true health of each individual in terms of their full employment and potential, right? Their earning potential. So I think unemployment is skewed. I also think unemployment doesn't account for the fact that we're about to have a technological revolution over the next decade in which automation is going to take place, and a lot of our manual based work will be automated, like machines will start doing it. And that will displace humans, and it could be positive because it means we don't have to do as manual labor work and we can focus on higher level work. But it also means that it might displace us from work, right? So if you're lower skilled, it might displace you. But I think unemployment doesn't accurately take into account the movement and the change of our economy and the need to perhaps tax robots. And it's not just about, are they employed, but like, what is the degree to which their employment is adding to the value in the economy? I don't know exactly how that should be measured, but the thing is, I just think unemployment is a very, it's a metric that's getting more and more outdated, and it's not keeping up for the technological changes that we're about to undergo, okay? That's my opinion. That second part of the video. The last part of the video is like, what does this mean? This is such a big picture vision. Like, what does all this mean to you as like a millennial who may just be living day to day, and you're just thinking, okay, what do I do to get through today? Well, first of all, let's not focus on things that haven't passed. Let's think about what is in place that we can leverage and utilize today. So obviously, PPP, economic disaster loans, just came out. My husband actually got approved. He got approved for $150,000 at 3.5% interest. I think super low interest. So there's a lot of things that if you're an entrepreneur trying to start your own thing, that you have access to some funds. But second of all, like millennials hold disproportionate amount of student loan debt. And I know like so many searches, people are obsessed about knowing, oh, is Biden going to forgive student loans? What's happening? Don't wait for that to happen. There's so many federal programs right now to help you with your student loans. An example, last night, one of our loan advisors helped somebody who between he and his spouse, they owe essentially $300,000 of student loan debt. His spouse owes $180,000 and she does not work. And so we can get her payments down to zero. And then for him, since he only holds about 1/3 of their total student loan debt, we could literally get his payment to 1/3 of the family payment, right? So his payment literally got lowered from over $1,000 to about $300. So their total family student loan debt goes to about $300 from $3,000, right? And that could last beyond September, right? So there's all kinds of federal laws already in place that if debt is your main focus or whatever it is that is impeding you and just draining you mentally, emotionally, and you've lost hope in like, how do you build your financial future? I'm telling you right now, there's laws and protections in place to help you today that you can become more knowledgeable on. It's obviously great to know all this information, but I don't want you to lose hope. I went from obviously graduating at the height of the economic crisis to gaining financial freedom by my mid-30s. And I activated all kinds of federal programs, from student loans to down payment assistance to even just finding the right lender who would be willing to give me more information, right? So there's always ways to get access to this knowledge capital that we have become as a society to optimize your financial well-being, okay? So if you like this type of content, I'm gonna present some policy, higher level stuff. I'm also gonna present much more tactical wealth building tips and tricks for those like me, not unlike me. If you're interested in that, please subscribe and leave your comments below. I will answer them. Love to help out where I can, of course. And yes, I wish you well.